Radha Radhe, and happy Independence Day for those celebrating for India's Independence Day today, August 15th. Welcome to Bhagavad Gita Study, this recap video for today's session. We'll run you through a summary of the content covered today as I momentarily bring up the screen. So as you all remember, we are in the early stage of chapter 14. Today we covered chapter 14, verses 3, 4, and 5. As always, if you look at the description for this video, you'll get access to the free community portal where you get all these slides and much more other reference material, especially the quiz questions and so on. So please do use that regularly for your benefit. Again, just look below, you'll get that information. So today, before we did the verses, of course, the new ones, we had a recap quiz, which was on last week's content covering chapter 14, verses 1 and 2. Thank you to everyone for participating there. And so with that, we now get into our summary, our recap for today's actual verses. Chapter 14, verses 3 and 4 appear together in Swamiji's Holy Bhagavad Gita. So I'll recite those together and then eventually come back to verse 5. Mama yonirmahad brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham sambhava sarvabhutanam tato bhavati bharata sarvayonishu kaunteya murtaya sambhavanti yaha tasam brahma mahad yonir aham bija pradah pita. So chapter 13, verse 3 has the catchphrase as a question to think about. We discussed in the session, soul womb. The pun on the first word here, right? The homophone soul, S-O-L-E, and S-O-U-L. And remember, we discussed both answers are what are intended here. Yes, it's a single, a soul, S-O-L-E, womb that Sri Krishna is talking about. That is Prakriti, that is Mother Nature. But also remember, once each individual soul emanates from a womb and becomes into a body, those are all these multitudes of living beings, so many wombs. So that's a large expanse of not just a single womb, but tons of them. So S-O-L-E, soul womb, S-O-U-L as well, something to ponder about. Chapter 14, verse 4 has the catchphrase with alliteration as, paying reference to the Supreme Lord, to Sri Krishna, fatherly farmer. We often, of course, hear of him as the father. He is the father, grandfather, great-grandfather, etc. He's the supreme father of everyone, Pita, as he says in this verse specifically also. However, he is the seed-giving father. As a farmer, he is sowing seeds full of love and devotion and life for all of us. So I've turned it around. Instead of something father or farming father, perhaps here it is fatherly farmer, really stressing upon the nurturing that Sri Krishna does for each of us. So now for these two verses, the translation is, as we sort of hinted and mentioned in class, Prakriti, that total material substance, is the womb, that entire cosmic womb. Sri Krishna impregnates it with individual souls. That's the Jiv Shakti energy we talked about. And thus all living beings are born. So he tells Arjun, Kaunteya, the son of Kunti, for all these species of life that are produced, he is the seed-giving father, providing the seeds, that impregnation to Mother Nature, material nature, which is akin to the womb. So we had seen a little bit of connection, of course, to prior chapters. Swamiji says here, chapters 7 and 8, we talked at length about the process of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. So you can go back and look at those. It's early on mentioned somewhere in the commentary in chapter 2 also, but more at length in chapters 7 and 8. I reminded us about chapter 8, verses 17 and 18 in particular. That talks about, again, the length of Brahma's day, Brahma's night, the extent and process of creation, and then reversal, the process of dissolution. So here we get a little bit more detail. We've often mentioned, right? When God wants to create, he glances at Prakriti, the material energy, and the process of creation starts. It is all being being done under the direction and will of the Supreme Lord, and of course with the secondary creator, Brahma. Today we talk about the reversal. Reversal is when that energy becomes latent, it is unmanifest. So material energy, Prakriti, it goes back into God's body, where specifically it is God's Mahodar, that is his big stomach. Again, the cosmic stomach, where that latent energy is sitting till God next glances at it and the process of creation starts. So when that creation process happens, we did talk at length. We have Mahan. You start off with that. No real English word that's a direct equivalent of this. We did mention that. So something for everyone to keep in mind. And then, of course, we have Ahankar. We talked about that. Ego, Panch Tanmatras. So Shabd, Sparsh, Roop, Ras, Gandh. So sound, touch, taste, vision, taste, and smell. So the five standard senses that we all are familiar with. And finally, from them, you also have the associated Panch Mahabhuta, the five gross elements. So, again, from highest to lowest, space, air, fire, water, earth. You can go back and look at chapter 2, verse 28 in the commentary there for the different types of bodies Swamiji describes. We've first come across the gross elements there. So all this is the sequential process of creation unfolding. And as we said, it's with the assistance of the secondary creator, Brahma. So material energy, Prakriti, gets us to all these various life forms. So from that one Mother Nature womb, all the individual wombs emanate. And Sri Krishna chooses all of them, as we've learned before as well, based on our past karmas, based on our past sanskars, our tendencies, our inclinations. So you can start seeing soon enough a connection to the three gunas will be made as well. But that is really what's happening here. And so, again, this analogy, Sri Krishna states it Prakriti is like the womb, souls are like the sperms. Single womb giving rise to multitudes of living beings. This is also mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, similarly, in the womb of the material energy, the Supreme Lord impregnates the souls. And then, how are those souls getting the selected womb, the selected body? It's inspired by the karmas of the individual souls. And now, who gets to be in all this? Who has what sounds like, a blessing, but in a way, a misfortune, actually, that we're coming back in the material world. It's happening only for those souls who are vimukh. We've often heard Swamiji describe it this way. Vimukh means the back is facing God. We're turned away from God, whereas we need to face God. What that means is in terms of consciousness, right? Having that spiritual inclination and that entire love and bhakti for God. So those who are not there yet, they haven't made it to God's divine realm. They are the Vimukh souls. They're not Sanmukh. So the Vimukh souls, of course, have to come back into this material universe when that process of creation happens. Keep in mind, I had shown you here, chapter 3, verse 27. This is one of the early verses where you can see it's mentioned all activities are carried out by the three modes of material nature. But in ignorance, the soul, deluded by false identification with the body, thinks itself to be the doer. So go back and revisit that, and you can look at the commentary as well. And likewise, we had also mentioned chapter 7, verse 14. That is where Sri Krishna says, My divine energy Maya, oh, consisting of the three modes of material nature. So here again, he mentions now what Maya's components are. And then he says, it's very difficult to overcome. Implicitly, it's not impossible to overcome. And so he states in the next part, but those who surrender unto me cross over it easily. So again, getting to the concept of bhakti and grace from God himself. So chapter 3, verse 27 and chapter 7, verse 14. Back here then, let us now look at chapter 14, verse 5. Sattvam rajastama iti gunah prakriti sambhavaha nibadnanti mahabaho dehe dehinam avyayam. So chapter 14, verse 5 also has its catchphrase as a question, as I presented to you in the session, material meld, alliteration and a question. Meld, hopefully many of you do recognize, it is a combination or a blending or a concoction of things. So here the question to think about, and we saw it has both the responses, is material meld? Yes, Maya is a material meld, a blend, a concoction of the three modes of nature, the three gunas. But we also see in this verse that our soul is bound to our body because of the three gunas. The soul, remember, is divine, it's not material. So you get a concoction here of a divine soul with a material body and, of course, the material gunas. So, yes and no, material meld. Yes, in the first case, no, in the second case. So keep that in mind as we now look at the translation here. Sri Krishna explicitly now tells Arjun, the mighty armed one, Mahabaho, that Maya, the material energy, Prakriti, consists of three gunas, the three modes. Sattva, the mode of goodness, Rajas, the mode of passion, and Tamas, the mode of ignorance. And he states these modes bind the eternal, the divine soul, to the perishable, the material body. So a preview of set of facts over here, which then connect to many verses to come, which is why Swamiji says that we've now gotten a reminder and explanation of how life forms are created, Purush and Prakriti, that combination. And then coincidentally, we are in chapter 14. Henceforth, in the next 14 verses, Sri Krishna will explain how Prakriti binds the soul. So it binds the soul, of course, because of or through these three modes. We'll see that in detail. The modes, again, as I briefly mentioned in the session, we all perhaps know this. Sattva, the mode of goodness, caring for the welfare of others, being kind, calm, being charitable. Rajas, the mode of passion, very action oriented, action in terms of the material sense. Oh, these are my material goals and responsibilities. Someone wants to get ahead in their career, someone wants to get fame and name and glory for themselves, and so on. And tamas, the worst, the lowest, the mode of ignorance. As we had said, ignorance literally from the spiritual sense and from the material sense. Because, of course, the person is far from spirituality, but even in the material sense, not caring for anyone, not really caring for themselves as well. It is darkness figuratively because there is sloth, laziness, intoxication, and so on, anger, violence. So that's just a quick preview of these three modes of material nature, the three gunas. Prakriti, remember, is what creates our mind, intellect, and ego. And therefore, those three modes are also connected with these entities, and all that is material. The example, the analogy Swamiji gives is of three-color printing. So as I had said in class, if you look at three colors, ignore the fourth, which is black usually, that cartridge or ink, you have cyan, magenta, and yellow. So typically you have those three, right? CMY, cyan, magenta, yellow. Or if you look at, let's say, TV screens, pixels, you look at the primary colors, as I say, you've learned as a child in science, RGB, right? Red, green, blue. Doesn't matter which ones, but this combination of three, it's an analogy for the three modes of material nature, these three gunas. And so as you have more ink of one kind or more pixels of one color, you get more and more shades or hues of that particular color. Likewise, in us, we'll see in the weeks to come, predominance of a certain guna at a certain point in time determines more of what our behavior or impacts are, like that guna, lesser of the other two, but it keeps fluctuating, it varies, but our personality develops based on, of course, how over a lengthy period of time and past sanskars, past lifetimes, these gunas have played a role in dominating us or not dominating us. So Swamiji says that Sri Krishna now describes the impact of these modes upon the living beings. That's what we'll see when, of course, we meet next time. So with that, let me first take us to let us do the Sanskrit words first. So we covered, of course, 5 from each verse. the very, let's say, one or two most important ones, perhaps you can isolate. So from chapter 3, let us look at this one, which is Mahat Brahma, a variant of Mahan. That is the total material substance, Prakriti. So that's Mahat Brahma. And then let's talk about, of course, existence, right? So birth, to manifest. So let's do Sambhavaha, birth. Sambhavaha is birth. Then from chapter 14, verse 4, let us see Murtayaha, that is forms, all these variants, all these species, life forms, Murtayaha. And where are they coming from? It's all because of the Supreme Lord. It's the seed giving farmer, remember? Farmer and father. So Bija Pradaha, that is seed giving. So those words you can keep as more important, even if you want, in your Sanskrit dictionaries. And then chapter 14, verse 5, let us look at this one. We are stuck, right? The soul is bound. It is bind, which is nibadhananti. Nibadhananti is bind. The soul is bound to the body because of the three modes of material nature, which in fact then takes us to the flyer for today. As we had discussed, you have this body here, this outline, you have something glowing in the center, and you have our three typical friends we'll see a lot in this chapter, right? The blue, red, yellow. The question is, on this Independence Day, of course, chosen, what independence does our soul lack? You are bound to know this. So there's hope because we all are supposed to know the answer. There's a bit of a pun used here because bound is as in you're certainly going to know this. Well, the irony is that we as the soul are bound to the body because of the three gunas. So if you go back to the translation, these modes bind the eternal soul to the perishable body. So right here, if you go back to the flyer, what independence does our soul lack? Well, it's not free yet to have made it to God's divine realm. And that is because, as you can see, the soul here is being tugged upon, it's being tugged at by these three, of course, gunas, the modes of material nature, and they are gripping the body as well. So they're binding the soul to the body, eternal divine soul, but material perishable body. Because of these three, as I often say, friends will see throughout this chapter, the three gunas. So we, of course, we certainly now know the answer. We are bound to know it. And that, unfortunately, is the independence that the soul lacks. So keep that in mind as you make a visual connection to today's content. And finally, as I'd mentioned, perhaps you can think about this as some extended homework if you want, or some research. I did mention to everybody that we are getting more and more information on these modes of material nature. Mode itself as a word, you'll often see, we know it's guna. We often see guna or gun in Hindi as well to do with quality, characteristics, tendencies, inclinations in some sense as well, which is why we'll talk about how a person's personality is shaped or shaded as well by the three gunas. In Old English, mode, some of you may have thought also, it's very close to mood. And indeed, there's a connection there as well. So you all can go ahead and research this as well. But something to easily keep in mind, mood as well is to do with, in this case, this mechanism, these modes that are qualities of material nature, again, shaping or influencing our behavior, our tendencies, our temperament. So mode, mood, often, you can make that connection as well, which is why when we talk about sattva eventually, we'll talk about rajas, we'll talk about tamas, we'll actually see moods also playing a big role over there. So that gets us close to the end of this recap video. As we did say in the session, we shall meet now after 2 weeks. Next week is the Dallas Spiritual Retreat that hopefully many people can take part in, either in person or virtually. So when we next meet, it'll be Saturday, 29th August, 2026, 8 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. India time. Till then, thank you so much. Happy Independence Day once again. Thank you and Radhe Radhe.